Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies. Alrighty, and we are live and back at it with another episode of Table Talk, our first episode of the new year of 2025. Welcome. And I know we took a little hiatus because of holiday madness. And just getting settled in the beginning of January, but we are officially back. So welcome. I am your host, Alejandra.
And I am your other host, Mariah.
Incredible. And to kind of kick off our new year, new podcast, new us situation, we were going to talk a little bit about I think the journey of being a DM is ever evolving and ever changing. And sometimes you get thrown situations that you're like, okay, we had not only a hiatus for the podcast, but we also had a hiatus from our home game for like 3 months, which I think is a common experience for like most people around this time of year, because scheduling is already a bitch. And then you throw in on top of that, like holidays after holidays and people having plans and other things like D&D just unfortunately takes to the back burner as a priority for many people. So we went like,
it wasn't 3. It wasn't like, so we, it was like, it was really, it feels so long because we only play once a month. Like, we played in October because we played like around my birthday. Yeah. And then we did not play in November. And then we did play in December. So it was like a month and a half, maybe.
It felt like 25 years.
But it felt like forever because of where we're at in the plot of we're like, okay, like sick how it's going to be like a weekly game now when we hit like a certain point instead of monthly. Because like we just can't.
Yeah,
like,
it's true.
I'm sorry. We have to speed run to the end of this arc.
It's truly the bane of how we've like timed our campaign, because it does take us about like a full calendar year, because we only play once a month, to really like get to like the apex of an arc. And right around when the shit is popping off is the holidays. So then I just corner myself in being like, cool, all the things are happening that I've been setting up for the entire year, and I'm foaming at the mouth, but then we have to stop playing for a while. And I'm that little Dobby puppet that is like shaking in a diner.
Yeah. You're like, I'll just die then, I guess.
And then just foaming at the mouth and gnawing at the bars of my enclosure in a corner. And be like, this is fine. Everything is fine. But yeah, so we went a little while without playing to all of our sadness. And
we had like a 3-month hiatus, like closer to like the summer, early fall. Because of like Bex's job mostly, and then I also had a move like last summer, and like so we did have like a 3-month hiatus last year as well, and then we had another little one at the end of the year.
So I was just like, it won that first 3-month hiatus, and then we finally get to start playing, and then I finally got us like ramped up to the things that are supposed to be happening, and then we had to take a break again, and I was like, no, I'm dying inside. And then I had to sit with myself because, we're on Callista's arc, Bex's character. And the session before, I left us on a cliffhanger where she was going to go to like a big family dinner where a lot of stuff was going to happen. And she was going to be separated away from the party. And so I had a moment where, it's like, okay, we haven't played in like, a month and a half. We're all like foaming at the mouth for this. But it was also consequently, as people on this podcast know, we mention it all the time, like we normally play on a weekend and we end up sitting down for like anywhere between 6 to fucking 10 hours, sometimes more if we're feeling frosty about it.
It's like a whole day with like breaks for meals and stuff, but like it's a day.
Yeah. this session, our first session back, was going to be a session that we timed for like after work, basically on a weekday. So it was going to be a much shorter session. Although I think we still ended up playing like 6 hours.
It was like the day before New Year's. It was like December 30th. So it was in that kind of like Twilight Zone-y time. So like I was off work.
But I think Alyssa didn't get off work until
Alyssa didn't get off work until later. Yeah, and like Bex couldn't come in until later. So like we didn't start until probably like 6-ish.
Yeah.
But yeah, we still played pretty late because like everybody had off the next day, I think, for New Year's Eve. So it ended up working out okay. It wasn't like we had to go to work the next day, which would have been rough.
Yeah. So, but it was going to be, you know, a air quotes shorter session.
Yes.
And I was sitting with it and I was like, you know, it's going to really suck because I think the stuff that I'm going to be doing with the dinner is pretty much going to take up most of that session. And that's going to be very Callista centered. And I didn't want 2 of my players to kind of just be sitting there watching and spectating.
Yeah. Well, you have like a one-on-one session.
Yeah.
With Callista,
after having spent such a while, like without touching it and playing. And I knew that everybody was like itching to do it. But at the same time, like the stuff that was going to happen at this dinner was so important that I didn't want to detract from those scenes by being like, you know, heavy drama and tension with what's happening with Callista. And then I somehow like I cut it somewhere and I'm like, so what are you 2 goons doing back home? Just like,
yeah, you know. Like in a CW show where someone's like bleeding out on a sidewalk and then they cut to like other characters at a coffee shop and you're like, wait, I don't care about those people right now. Like go back to the other one.
Exactly. So I was kind of like sitting there and I was like, I'm gonna kind of like manage this, right? Because I didn't want to detract from the intensity of Callista's scenes, but I also wanted to give y'all like your metaphorical money's worth, right?
Yeah, you want us to be involved, right?
Yeah. And that was when like I think you and I were sitting together. I was like,
we were talking about it just like on my couch.
Yeah, because I was like, hey,
I'm come together.
Yeah, I've been like thinking about something and like I think I wanted to just like run it by you as an idea. And
I had also been thinking the same thing as you. I was like, yeah, I wonder how that's gonna work. And like I wasn't stressing about it, but like I also had the same thing of like we've set ourselves up where we need to be in the story is like Callista and her family, which like the other PCs are not and have no need to be there. Like there's no like justification
there's
for them to be there.
Events that I can pull some strings and justify why you would be there. This was not one of those.
No.
And I couldn't just have y'all rock up to the exclusive family dinner. No. And so it was something that I was like kind of struggling with, and like it was a challenge because like I think very much as a dungeon master or a game master, like your priority is to make sure everybody's having fun and like getting you know, although it can be centered around a specific character at times, that it doesn't feel like, all right, this is like Callista's arc, so fuck off everybody else. Like nothing is happening.
This character is the only one that matters, right? Like you can shift the spotlight, but the other PCs still have to have something that's going on, even if like their story is not like the main driving force of the narrative. Like we kind of trade off between like who's pushing the narrative and who is more secondary and tertiary narratives that are also flowing in the background,
which is very much a skill. And it's also like it's
hard to do
a degree of self-awareness and like perception, I guess, of like being able to manage scenes on its own is a challenge. And making
like
sure that nobody's getting
too... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say like making sure nobody's getting too like main character syndrome-y and you're still kind of highlighting other characters even if you're focused on like a particular character arc.
And that like all of your players trust you as the DMGM enough to know that you are going to pan the camera around and get to everybody, or that you are going to monitor and catch when people have moments they want to hop in. And so it's not just like 6 wet cats in a trash bag fighting for their life. And like we're talking over each other and we're yelling and like no one knows what's going on ever.
Yeah.
Because everyone feels like they have to immediately get their 2 cents in or the story's going to move on and they won't get to.
Yeah. And I think it's also helped a lot that like one, I was a player before I was a game master, although that is not required of anybody. But I do think that the 2 separate experiences have helped me. Being a player has helped me be a good game master because I know the things that I've experienced as a player and what I would like to avoid doing to my players. And yeah, like we are very roleplay heavy. So making sure the camera is panning accordingly and giving everybody a moment before moving on. And also being a game master has helped me become a better player because now I'm a little bit more conscious and aware of when the DM is like, you know, dropping a line and that someone needs to grab it so that we can go down something that like the DM has specifically planned.
Yep, for sure.
Or just being like, I think more understanding of if and when I ask for something that it's not absolutely wild bonkers. Although wild bonkers ideas are great, sometimes you got to have a little bit of like perspective of like, hey, I know you are a dungeon master and you are currently running a game. So I'm not going to shit in your house by asking something absolutely game breaking without reason.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, so like it was an interesting scenario that I was encountering where I was like, okay, how am I going to manage this session that we've all been looking forward to and still making sure that everybody feels like equal levels of involved. And as you and I were talking, I was like, you know, I've had the thought because Callista has several siblings and two in particular stood out to me as far as ones that I could like potentially hand off and give y'all access to in order to be involved within like the scenes that we're going to play out. And subsequently, I also felt like they lined up like the two brothers that I specifically had in mind. I felt lined up really well with you and Alyssa as players and characters.
Totally, yeah. Because it's very much a thing where like all of us are very interested and invested in all the Bloodstone siblings, but there are specific characters that like Alyssa and I respectively have taken a shine to that have nothing to do with like our PCs and their relationships to Bloodstones and things where like there's no reason that our PCs would ever like interact with or really know any deep information about these people, but we as players love them. So we want the tea. It's rough because we're like, but I want to know about my child that isn't my child.
Yeah. So I was like, you know, I had the idea that I was like, well, I could have y'all basically for this session take over those characters and play them within the scene. And when I voiced it to you, you were like,
I was like, yes, that. I had to pull myself back because I was like, stay calm.
Stay absolutely calm. Don't scare her.
Keep it demure. Keep it mindful. I was like, I saw the crack in the door and like the intrusive thought was like Kool-Aid Man through it. And then I was like, no, we must be delicate. So I was like, okay. I was like, I see a path to the information I crave.
But it was also to the respect of like, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, because like my main aversion to it, right, was because like, in order to have each of you play these characters true to the character and the story, that obviously entailed me letting each of you in on some specific details about said characters.
But yes, very much so.
Prior to that moment was like privileged information basically for me only that I have just been sitting on.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, I think there's a way to do it because you know, in even in like, for example, like your arc, there is a degree of like, okay, here's an arc where like 2 of the players don't know anything that's going on. It's your arc. I'm like, you know, some of the stuff that's going on. But I know everything that's going on, including stuff that you do not.
Right.
So it was kind of like there's a pressure release valve in you that I'm like, I can, if I need to vent about something specific, I can go to you about specific details, but not everything.
Yeah.
And the other players don't know.
Right.
With this arc, I was like, okay, if I let you each in with these little like pieces. The nice thing about Callista's arc is since it's very fucking like Lannister Malfoy coded as like a family without the incest. I need to make that known because someone did comment about that, and I was like, no.
Yeah,
none of that.
Important point to make. More in just like the unhealthy, toxic argumentativeness, and definitely the secret is also not incest. Like, confirm it's not incest.
Can't confirm the secret is super not. But yeah, so it was because of that element of her family. I'm like, there are so many like hidden corners of the family dynamics, the motivations. It's very political. So I'm like, there's no amount of like, I could let you in on everything about Chiron, which is the character you ended up playing.
The oldest
and you would still know like a fraction of the glacier of what is happening in that fucking family.
Because like you're still controlling the Bloodstone matriarch and patriarch, which are really like the big beefy troves of information. And like, each of the kids have their own things and their own secrets and their own issues and problems and things that they're trying to maneuver around. But it becomes a little bit like levels of clearance. I think it's something that makes the most sense in my brain, where it's like, okay, you can like give us information about a very specific thing that then we can chat about. But it still doesn't, there's so many secrets to pick from that it does not spoil the overall arc in any way.
Yeah. And then, you know, I can go to Alyssa and tell her things about her character that she ended up playing, Lucius, who's like the second oldest brother. Chiron is the heir, the oldest.
Yes.
And yeah, it was like I could let you both in on things that both of the brothers know. And then I could separate you and be like, Chiron knows this, but nobody else does. And Lucius knows this, but nobody else does.
Yes.
And then on top of that, like Callista still has things that only she knows. And both of the brothers do not. And so I'm like, I liked that once I kind of settled it within myself, because I think, like as a DM, I think there is a pressure. And like sometimes I get really hard on myself because I'm renowned to be a very shitty liar. And sometimes I accidentally say things and spoil things for my players. And it kills me. It makes me want to like throw myself off a cliff.
I've inadvertently done that with VTM too, because also like we don't get to play that often as of right now. Like hopefully that'll get better this year. But like there are things where like we've had conversations as people about NPCs that I love and they're my beautiful boys. But like you really shouldn't have known that because your characters think that person's dead. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, well, that kind of fucked it up a little bit. Right. And it's like I didn't really realize that until we started getting closer to
playing. And
and I'm like, like I shouldn't have done that.
I think I've gotten better, but like, there is a pressure where you want those reveals to be satisfying. And if it accidentally slips one day because you're like, hey, let me show you this fucking character art I found, and I forgot that the label right on top of that art.
That's what it is.
Says
like completely unintentional. Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna actually go kill myself. It's so bad. But no, it's something that, especially with an arc like Callista's, where I'm like, there are so many secrets and there's so many like little reveals that I've been sitting on for now literally 2 years. Because I've had a lot of these concepts since we started the fucking campaign, and there's a pressure there. But I eventually like grew more fond of it because the aversion was there initially because I was like, no, I want to keep all the secrets so that the reveals are really like big and whatever. But then the more I thought about it, the more I liked the element of like letting each of you in on something. And then that relieves a little bit of like the pressure for me because like now if I want to go rant about something, I'm like, I can go. I've put you in separate corners of a room and you're all facing a conspiracy board personalized for you.
We're
with
all
blinders. With blinders on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm in the middle of the room and I can just walk over to you and be like, hey, let's talk about this. And then I can go over to the other person and talk about something else. And then I'm in the center of the room with the fucking mind map that nobody else can see.
Yes. And I think like it's a super, and we've also like talked about us kind of having other opportunities. Like we got to play, Alyssa and I got to play these characters. And the last time we played our Strixhaven campaign, which was really fun. And we had a really fun moment freaking Bex out because you just like pulled both Alyssa and I aside 2 different times. Which was great.
Bex was not aware of what was going to happen.
No.
And I love the moment that Bex was like, so what's happening with the other girls? Like, what's going on with their characters? And we did like a very brief, like, yeah, they're doing this. Anyway, back to the thing at hand.
Like I had Anya's character sheet out and I'm like, I know I'm not going to need it, but I can't. Like Alyssa just she had like dice and nothing else. But I think she had her phone out, and Alyssa usually uses D&D Beyond. So that was fine. But I was like, I have to put Anya's stuff out because if I don't, that'll like raise suspicion that I'm not, So like, I'm like, I know I'm not going to need this, but it's like, she's out. And yeah, like I could tell Bex was starting to get a little bit nervous of like, we're not doing anything with the other players. And both Alyssa and I were like, just get to the dinner and let me whip out my big high level beefy boy.
Yeah. And then I had the very satisfying moment of pulling you guys aside and making Bex sweat at the table before the dinner so that I could basically hand you the character sheet that like I made for them and just explain to you like, hey, he's Chiron is a Pally Warlock situation. Here's how he kind of works. And then Lucius is a blade singer. And
God bless Alyssa, who mostly plays barbs.
Yeah, I did my research and then sat with Alyssa probably a little bit longer than I sat with you so that she could kind of understand what the tea is on the blade singer. Yeah. Granted, we were doing a mostly RP heavy. There was going to be a point for y'all to like pop off spells, but I was like, I kind of let her know like, hey, this is the situation that's going to pop off. Lucius would likely use any mixture of these kinds of spells that I've already picked. You decide how you're going to like maneuver
suppression and sneakery, like Misty Step. Like, we weren't like fighting. So that was nice. Cause I mean, like, I wasn't really worried about it. Cause like I've played like really high level I've not played as high a level of paladin as Kai is, but like I've played characters that are his level and higher, and I've played obviously Anya's a paladin. I've played other paladins, so I'm like I can piece together enough of what I'll be fine. But like it would be we've talked about like having a little practice run with them, so we could play around with them and kind of see how they work.
Yeah, because it's something that like I haven't really seen other like DMs do this necessarily.
No.
But I like the idea of it because one, on top of the fact that like although I've been doing this for 2 years, I'm still fairly new and like we don't really get into combat that often. So like I would say that's still probably one of my weakest skills because I just tend to avoid it like the plague. And you guys are also really good about talking your way out of combat. So even when I do have a combat prepared half the time, we end up cutting it short because y'all have managed to weasel out of it. And which is great for me. But also like when it comes to leading up to, big finale fights, it can get a little nerve wracking when I'm like thinking about how many enemies are going to be on the field, especially for this upcoming fight. There's going to be some big beefy players in that field and kind of managing resources for myself because combat is not my strongest, even as a player sometimes. So managing that many like things on the field and the mechanics and switching between like big beefy character sheets and like what they can do is a bit overwhelming for me. So then when we did this, I was like, well, there's a world where like now that you've had a little bit of experience with these characters and like we might have like a little mini combat test run just so that y'all could mechanically play these characters and understand how they work before that big fight so that basically at the finale I could hand those off to you and that way you're managing 2 characters in combat, Alyssa's managing 2 characters in combat. I may potentially give Callista a character to manage aside from her own. And that takes a little bit of pressure off of me. And I can just worry about the massive, like level 15, level 20 characters that are also fighting on this field amongst themselves.
And,
exactly. Whatever other people y'all are going to be fighting on that field as well. And yeah, I really like that as like, I guess, like, I like it as a tool for relieving pressure for me. But then also I feel like it gets y'all active and invested in a story arc that isn't super centered around your characters at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like just gets you involved and invested in what's going on because now you've grown attached to those characters. You were already attached to them as NPCs, but now you have like a personal investment.
Yeah, and like it entrenches us in the world a little bit more too. And like I've thought about potentially doing some of this with VTM as well as we get further down, because I also have all of my NPCs are extremely high, like at least elders, like just normal elders, if not off the book, like Methuselah elders. So it's like there are certain characters, right, which like I will always need to retain control of them, either because like they have a hand in every pot, and if I couldn't tell anyone one thing about them without telling you everything about them, right, because they're involved in everything. But there are other NPCs that, similar to like Kai and Lucius, they are going to play a big enough role and they're going to be on the field and be doing things, but it might allow me to have a little more breathing room, especially especially if that ever comes to like combat and things like that. Like, it's not a right now thing. So we need to play more of VTM and get more. Everyone needs to get, myself included, needs to get more comfortable with like the system. But it is like a really fun and interesting idea. I think like, so when we were talking about like, we both had a same brain cell moment where we're like, this should be our kind of next episode because it's the most interesting thing we've done recently. And I was thinking about like why it seems like why this feels like a novel idea, or it feels like something that like people don't do. So like you and I have also talked about how like, oh, it would be kind of cool to have like a co-DM, right? Like running a game where someone who could like help you role play NPCs or like help you plan things, like, you know, to some, whether they're just like popping in to like help run half your NPCs or they're actually helping you form plot the story. And this is kind of similar of like contracting that out to your players a little bit. And I think when there's a massive amount of trust involved in that, and then like one of the biggest issues obviously is like information bleed, right? So it's like and that can be really tough. I think we're all fairly experienced players at this point, and like we've been in the tabletop gaming space for long enough that it's like we can separate what we know as people and what our character knows.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I think what is another thing that we are also good at is like, even though we are experienced and good, tend to be pretty good about it, in the moments when we're not, the other players do catch it and be like, hey, you wouldn't know that though. And like, we make sure to keep each other like kind of honor bound to what our characters would know. In the moments that it's like, you know, because we do, sometimes you can get ahead of yourself because you're like, I'm privy to some information, but then you have to like be reminded.
It's like,
but like nobody gets offended. It's like, no, you're right, my character wouldn't know, so I'm not gonna say anything.
Yep, exactly.
It is I think you're right in the train of like I wish it was maybe something that was more common, but I can see why it wouldn't in some spaces, because it does require a very big degree of trust in your players, which like I can proudly say I do have with everyone at my table. But we've been playing with each other for years, and consistently so too. And so, I had a great degree of trust in both of you, and I knew that you would be able to pull this off. And I knew that like, and I want to ask you, because like now that the session's like kind of passed, you know, nothing crazy spoilery for in case Bex listens to this episode. But in the respect of like when I pulled you aside and I was like talking to you and Alyssa, because again, it was something that I was like, I don't want to take away too much agency from you, but there is a certain way that I picture this going, because it's strange to be like, this was going to be an NPC that I controlled and I would have authority over how this played out, and I'm handing it off, and I'm like, I struggled a little bit with like, how much do I dictate to you about how the scene will play out versus letting you have control. And I was like, I wanted to know like your honest feedback about like how that conversation went. Did you feel like I kind of railroaded you a little too much, or was it like enough? Was it not enough? Like what did you feel?
Like, it's, for me, I always operate better with more information. So that's like why when you and I were first discussing the idea, and it was like, well, should we wait to like have conversations about these characters at all? Like until the first time you pull us aside in game. And I'm like, I'm gonna be real with you. I need way more information about this character to play them accurately. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to have time. I wouldn't have had time in that moment to ask you everything I needed to ask you to like do that character justice. So for me, I didn't feel railroaded because it is a little bit like in my brain, like I don't look at like I was joking that like you and I have like shared custody of Chiron, but like Chiron is not 100% my character, right? Like like if you pulled me aside and you were narrating a scene of like how Anya would react to something, that would be weird and problematic. But like I don't feel that way with Kai, because like that is something where like I am helping you act out a story you already had plans for. So like I have opinions or things, or like how he might perceive something or how he might react to something, but I'm gonna ask and verify that with you first because you were the one that came up with the character. And so it's like I didn't personally feel railroaded because I guess I did not view them as like my characters that I fully control. And so in that moment, I wanted more to know, like, how do we want this to go down? Because I didn't want to fumble or seem confused when that scene was playing out in front of Bex. So it was more like the more information I have about how you perceive this going down, like, there's roles and there's a certain level of like, we're not just one act playing, completely acting something out. But like, that's why I think like I kept asking you stuff like, is it this? Or like, okay, we're going to hit problems here, or like this part will be easy. And this one was when it'll start getting problematic, because like in the moment, I wanted to know the lay of the land. And so it was like that kind of a moment where, like it's not railroading, but like being near railroaded a bit was preferable, because it was more of like I'm improvising a scene than I'm controlling a character for me.
Okay. Yeah, because I did want it to be like it kind of broke up into two separate scenes. So like for context of the listener, they're at this dinner. Their whole family's there. They're celebrating the engagement of Callista, and also announcing the engagement to Callista at this dinner. Because she did not know she was basically engaged already.
Super healthy.
Super
not
healthy.
Problematic.
Not at all problematic. And so like for the dinner itself, I was like, y'all can kind of vibe and do what you want. You know the information about your character. You know everything you would need to know to play them out at this dinner accordingly. There's not a specific game plan I had in mind for how the dinner would go. There's like conversations that were had or whatever. Yeah. But it was a lot more loosey-goosey.
Yeah, like
stuff.
Kai and Lucius are both old enough to both have like preset roles especially for Kai with me, like in the family. And so I'm like, I knew what Kai's job is at these types of events, right? And it is to keep the waters calm and to put out fires and keep all the plates spinning. So I'm like, that's what he's on and dialed in 100% of the time. Yeah.
But then like the second part of the dinner, where all the kids go to sleep at the family home, was when things were going to get a little interesting, because for context of the player, Callista's father and all of your respective fathers was planning a coup. And the engagement of Callista is a key part of that coup because it solidifies an alliance to another royal family he needs in order to do it. And a thing he basically had done was all the children were magically put to sleep once they retired to ensure that they wouldn't wake, and their blood was taken.
Over table, I would not get into this too much because this we're getting a little too close to secrets.
No, yeah. But like the essence is there all of the children's blood was taken, and then I pull y'all aside and basically told y'all like you've been told like you gotta go and get that stuff back. And then kind of like I told you enough to know that like Thena's another sibling would walk in on y'all and you would have to deal with that situation when it arose.
And then like Callista will come in and we'll have to like basically convince Callista to go along with the brothers.
With the
plan to neutralize the situation.
Correct. So that was the point that I was like, these are the things that you know that like there is a ward on his office and 2 people have to man it at any given time. When Thena comes by, somebody's going to have to take care of her before she gets to Urias. And like how that plays out is kind of up to you. I had the idea that it should be Lucius to go get Thena, but I kind of still wanted to leave it up to y'all to see what you would kind of decide and how roles would play out. Because it is a game of choice and chance and consequences. And because of the act of relinquishing control in its nature, I was still open to being like, hey, if it doesn't play out how I originally thought it might go, then we're just going to roll with it. But y'all did both kind of end up like talking to each other and realize like, no, I think Lucius should go do that. And Chiron would have the best chance of convincing Callista to help because of his relationship to Callista.
Yes.
And so like, that was the point that I was like, kind of nervous because I'm like, I don't want to like dictate too much.
But it just like it made sense. It's like either of us can knock out Thena. I mean, Lucius has had ways to do it cleaner because he's a caster. Like Kai would have literally had to like choke out his own sister to put her to sleep, which wouldn't have been ideal. And like Lucius would have had a much harder time convincing Callista to go along with breaking into Dad's office for some reason. Whereas like Callista trusts Kai enough where it's like, if it takes a lot less for Kai to be like, I need you to help me with this and not ask why. Let's be like, word. Okay, fair enough. You've done enough for me that like
I'll trust there. Yeah. So it was interesting to kind of try to manage that for sure. I'm glad it kind of felt like not like it's I don't know, it's something that I'm like I don't want it to feel like the kind of thing that you're like if you want it to go a very specific way you might as well just write a fucking book, right?
But there is a level also within like NPCs, and they are still for the most part NPCs, right? Like you are dictating what the NPC is doing. It's like now like what the players do and how so like in this situation like Callista was the wild card factor. If Callista had put her foot down and like demanded that Kai explain the whole thing before she like helped and like the clock ran out and Urias realized some fuck shit was going on, or like if Callista hadn't gone along with it and been or at any point like caused a ruckus, then that would have been a thing like, okay, now we all have to react to this. But like for everybody else, like you're making your best guess on how you think that PC will react. And you're saying like, okay, this is kind of how I feel the NPCs would move in accordance with that.
Correct. Yeah.
And so like, I don't really think that that's railroading, because like you can't leave everything up in the air NPC wise, especially NPCs when there's such a big cast of characters, which like, you have this problem specifically in Callista's arc, and I have this problem every day of my fucking life in VTM, where it's like you have to take a firm hand a little bit with like what the NPCs are doing, just so there's direction. And it's not like every time a player talks to an NPC, it all sounds the same, because you can't be like, you have to find that middle ground. I think you do not want to railroad people, but you can't be so afraid to like make a call that you don't drive the plot forward, or like your NPCs feel like ghosts because you're afraid, like, if they come off as opinionated toward one path or the other, then the players are going to interpret that as like the DM trying to control it. And I think also that can be a communication thing, where it's like, again, separation between like the people and the characters, where it's like, no, a character may say this, a character may super want you to do something. That doesn't mean that's what you should do, or that like me as the DM or you as the DM have like a super strong feeling one way or the other. Like that's what that character wants.
Yeah, it's definitely something that like I think it worked really well in this instance because of the fact that like I'm fortunate enough to have very good like players that I trust and that are as invested in the story as I am, and the characters and things like that. So like it really worked out perfect when I was deciding like what characters to give control. I was like, well, these two just like fit so well with each of you. And I knew that you were going to like respect and honor like who they are as NPCs.
Yes. And like the canon that's been established. We're not like taking them in a fully new direction.
Correct.
Like we're like, no, we're just adding more to, because we can focus on playing them while you're trying to play literally everyone else that's at the table. And so we can bring a bit more life to these
scene.
People that are also centric in the story right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something I really enjoyed, and I would recommend, if you feel like you have people at your table that you have like that level of trust and they have that investment with your story, because it felt great. I'm not gonna lie, it felt great to run that dinner and only be worried about like a handful of people instead of literally everybody. And also getting y'all involved in the scene. And I think it's definitely something I may repeat, because like we do encounter that often with our campaign, where like, you know, you're all going to your classes and other things, but like as your arcs start kind of ramping, sometimes there will be scenes where like, there's no reason for the other party members to enter the scene with that person's like intimate family, or, you know, whatever the situation is. And that's like a tool I can kind of have in my back pocket, and I can look at the other people involved in the scene and be like, who could I hand off so that y'all could still be involved?
Yeah, I'm probably going to borrow that for VTM as well. And there's even things like Jason Carl's done this with like LA by Night. I know too, where like he's brought in guest PCs to like role play as characters, and like he's still done the mechanics of like the dice, like telling people how many dice to roll and stuff like behind the screen. Like people ask like, oh, do I have this discipline or this ability? Like, is there anything I can do here? Like, so there might be some kind of, because I wouldn't want to like dump a super high level like elder character on you that like I've been putting off making the character sheet for. But there might be a compromise there as well, where like I could give y'all some peeks into these more established characters and like get you a little closer to some of the action.
Cool, yeah.
That's going like, on behind the scenes.
We can know academically like the degree of like what they can do, but then we're only focused on like role playing. And when it comes to mechanics, we can kind of defer to you and be like, so like, I want to do something akin to this. Is there anything that this character is able to do that would like work for that? And because you have a little bit more knowledge about how they work mechanically, you can be like, yeah, they're going to do this, and, you know, roll to see if they succeed or whatever.
Yep.
That'd be kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
That might be neat.
Because then, it's like, okay, we know who they are on the surface. I don't need to know anything. I don't need to read the holy texts and memorize them by heart.
Right. The fucking these like 70 dots. Like I got the we all in our Christmas exchange, a gift exchange, I was just like, I don't know what I want, like maybe a book or something or a dice. So like,
and we were like, we're gonna give you all the VTM content that exists in the world.
So I got like the cards. Bex got me the cards. Alyssa got me the Gehenna War book, because it has a little bit of information about like building out elder characters and like how many dots to assign and stuff, which will be super helpful because I'm just gonna have to bite the fucking bullet and actually make character sheets for these. Because we were talking about this when we were prepping for like Lucius and Kai. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna have to do that, huh? Like I can't keep just having like an obsidian page and a dream in my heart, or just like adding it. Like we're gonna have to have some actual like common sense in who can do what and why, or it's all just gonna fall apart. And then like, yeah, Ollie got me like quite a few little dice, beautiful little dice
VTM
babies for when I
Jody
roll
Dice Farm. Shout out Jody's Dice Farm.
Shout out Jody's Dice Farm and the sick fake rock dice. They're very pretty for when I roll my big beefers. But yeah, I think I wanna play around with that some more as well, because I think it will, kind of like you said, of like it could give y'all more context on the world and like pull you into some of the secrets and the fuckery that's going on a lot quicker than if you just had to, like, your characters might still have to investigate things, but like you could have a little peek into what's going on to sort of like bait the water a little bit.
Yeah. And it's also nice because like you'll then have that like pressure release valve in somebody where you're like, I need to go rant about a very specific thing that's going on in our plot, and I can do it with this person. And it still like retains the integrity of secrets for other players at the table. So like for me right now, it's wonderful because I'm like, I know that you know certain things, Alyssa knows certain things, Callista knows certain things. But I can say with full confidence that is going to be plenty of stuff that happens at this like coming finale. That
who knows what's going to happen there, truly.
Will be news to everybody involved, will be news to only some. And like it will still be very satisfying, which I'm so excited about.
Our poor anxious Chiron's just going to need like a ventilator. It's or like an asthma mat, something, like an inhaler, an edible, like something. He's going to need assistance.
Yeah. It's going to be so good. But yeah, I definitely 10 out of 10 from that experience, like would recommend if you have a good like group of players that you feel really comfortable with. And you know, maybe you are newer, or maybe you're a pretty experienced dungeon master, and maybe you just don't want to fucking run a scene with like 30 characters.
You just don't want to talk to yourself.
You don't want to sit and talk to yourself for 45 minutes. And I highly recommend.
Yeah. Because that's us when we're running these big things where it's just like, cool, time for my monologue that's 6 different people. Please watch as I turn from left to right. I hope you can tell the difference.
And make an attempt at different voices and inflections.
Let's all close our eyes and imagine together.
Yeah, I don't know if it's even coming off correctly, but we're just doing our best out here.
Really.
Because it's always funny because like when I'm the player, I always feel super immersed in it and I don't even notice it. But like when I'm the DM, I'm like, I feel silly.
Oh, same. I'm like I'm fucking it up. It's terrible. Yeah, like nothing's going right ever. And this is all the same person. Like, oops, the twist is that it's all the same person. Like, no one is an individual. Like, Jesus, it's a mess.
Yeah. But it was nice to like, especially at the dinner with like all the conversations that were being had and being able to like riff off of y'all at the dinner. It helped me so much to stay in character for the different NPCs that were at play. Because like everyone's having different conversations and it just felt like our normal game kind of thing.
It was like a lot of mini scenes. And so you could just kind of hop from mini scene to mini scene. And like we still got to have like little interactions with all of these other like interesting NPCs that like it would have been harder and a lot more emotional and mental labor on you to have to like have all of these characters interact with each other so that we could hear what they're saying and like draw conclusions about it. Whereas like the scary grandparents of like, yeah, we like we interact with them and you can get more of like their vibe and their motivations out that way without just being like old man yells at crows.
Yeah. It added a lot of like life and depth to those scenes that I feel like I don't ever really get to do whenever it's like two NPCs interacting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just very enjoyable. And then it's also something that like, again, I always find like the universal truth I've kept experiencing is like the more control that I release, the better the outcome.
Yeah, true.
Because and like without fail, it's happened every single time. And it's something really nice where like there's still things that like surprised me about the way that y'all like played out or reacted as like Chiron or Lucius respectively that I loved.
What
like,
surprised you? That like, isn't a spoiler.
Yeah, like I loved the way that you portrayed Chiron getting like up in arms about Arwen taking Callista aside on their own.
Oh yeah.
And it's like a degree that I wouldn't have thought about of his character. Because I've always thought of him as like very like, you know, just a good old boy and like he does what his parents tell him and, you know, he's always in line. But in respect to like his secret and how long he's been keeping it and Arwen and stuff, I was like, I love the characterization of that.
I got to pour a lot of my own childhood anxieties about like perfectionism and like being the good kid, the smart kid, the ideal one, and like the deep-seated anxiety and control issues and just like white knuckling through life that comes with that, and the tendency to be like, no, I need to know everything because if I know everything, then I can make it okay. But if you don't tell me everything, then I can't do what I do that makes it always okay.
Yeah. And it's also the fact that like, I think I just had never thought about it, but like, you know, he is a paladin warlock, like multi-class, like charisma is his strongest stat.
He's got one 20. Skill and it's charisma. He's got everything else he's dog shit at.
Everything else he's dog shit at. But
truly, his wisdom is negative. Insight checks hurt my heart.
Yeah, it was something that I loved, like watching play out because like I really hadn't made his sheet until like that scene was gonna happen. So and I did roll a like min max as fuck for him.
Yeah,
poor man.
He'll be fun in combat. He's awful if he's trying to pick up something in a social setting though.
But I loved the way that it was like playing out. That it's like I can so see the way that he's like, yeah, he's a nervous boy. He has a hard time like reading people, but he, by God, will smooth talk his way out of situations as very a survival charming mechanic.
Yeah, very charismatic. Like, yeah, it was really funny because like he was trying to very much smooth over like stuff with Callista's and Tended's parents. And someone was like, he's flirting with like Callista's fiance's mom. Like, no, that's not his intention.
Yeah, he's just so suave about it. But that and like Lucius, when Alyssa was playing him, and like again, things I hadn't considered because I hadn't made these sheets prior. And like, but like Lucius is a wizard and intelligence is his big beefy stat. And so she played him very analytical and like
was so
rolled
good.
like an absolute monster to kind of connect dots.
He picked up everything.
He picked up everything. He truly the only person at that dinner that knew 99% of what was actually happening.
Truly,
and like kept it to himself, which I love.
Buttoned up,
absolutely buttoned up. And I loved the way that Alyssa played that out. And like again, just something about like the way that I was watching y'all bring these characters to life that I've had for a while. That I like genuinely, I like sat back and I was like, you know, I don't think I could have done a better job. And like you've given me something like and brought these characters to life in front of me that I wouldn't have probably done on my own initiative. Because I'm like, again, like you're so busy with everything that's going on.
Yeah. There's not time to like hyperfixate on each individual NPC for as long as you would maybe like to. Or even if you do, like you don't remember that when it's game time and you're trying to juggle everything else.
And you're in the moment and things like that. So I'm like, I don't think I could have done a better job because I'm so focused on big picture that like yeah, I think sometimes like the minutia of like what the character would do kind of like falls flat because you're just trying to move the scene along. You're not kind of sitting there as a player playing this NPC and like really thinking about what they would do and why they would react the way, like all that. So yeah, I think you two did a phenomenal job at it and have given me like new characterizations for those NPCs that I wouldn't have done before.
Yeah. I loved how Alyssa portrayed kind of like Lucius and his wife Astrid's dynamic of like y'all play off each other with like that couple was so interesting because again, like we have the running joke of like Lucius has one of the healthiest relationships in the family and he seems like he's, you know, the coldest and cruelest child, but he like has fully the healthiest, most ethical setup of anyone. Like we love him for that.
And we love it.
But it's like, it was really cool, to see like this very bloodstone, full face on united front. But then, like, no, there's real care and tenderness and teamwork in this couple that like, we've never had a reason or information. Like Callista and Lucius are not
the
close.
Inside look.
No. So it's like, there's never been an opportunity to like glean that because our PCs are seeing the mask.
Yeah, you're seeing the mask. You don't get to see them behind closed doors in the same respect that you get to see, even though your character's not in there, you're witnessing a scene with another party member, right? And you get to like have a little bit of insight of what they are like, even when they're not in front of your character.
Yeah.
So yeah, you getting to have those kind of behind the scene looks at those NPCs play out at the table was nice. And yeah, it was just a fun time. And it's definitely like something I'm probably most likely going to do again at some point.
Yeah, I loved it. It was great.
And I think it's a good tool to have in your back pocket. And I would definitely recommend it. But yeah, it looks like we are coming up on time. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are looking forward to a whole other year of content and fun little episodes for you. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcast. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddysite.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.